You know, at one point in this episode, Obi-Wan was having nightmares and we saw flashes of sequences from the prequels, and I have to say, come on, dude, the prequels weren't that bad. Hello, interwebs, I hope you are all doing well, and I am so freaking excited because it is finally time for me to review Obi-Wan Kenobi. I have been, as I'm sure many of you out there, been so excited for this show because while I am a gal of the 90s and I grew up watching the prequels and I love them so much, I was very excited for Ewan McGregor to finally step back into the role of Obi-Wan, to just see this little boy back, and actually get, like, hopefully good material to work with. Because again, I love the prequels, but you know, we know. We all know. However, I have been a bit mixed lately on a lot of Disney's Star Wars products. I'm okay on The Mandalorian. I was a little bit down on Boba Fett, though there was stuff that I liked about it. And then everything before that is a whole other bag that I'm not even going to touch on this review. So I was a little bit trepidatious coming into this, despite my excitement. But I have to say, after now having watched the first two parts of the series, part 1 and part 2, this is truly excellent so far. Now, I said that initially about the Boba Fett show, so it still could go downhill, but if this is the level of quality that they are giving me with the show so far, I am extremely excited for the rest of this series because this was absolutely wonderful. There are a few things that I have some concerns about and that I didn't particularly love, but overall, the thing that I was coming to this show for, Obi-Wan and Ewan McGregor, I am getting, and it is phenomenal, and there is a particular surprise that I probably should have seen coming if I had thought about it, but I did not expect it all, and actually really delivers. So, before I get into that, if you have not watched the episode yet, I am going to go fully into spoilers here. I'm not gonna sort of have a spoiler-free section, so if you have not seen the episode, know right now, we're going full into spoilers. All right, now with that out of the way, I just have to say up front, we are going to go through this beat by beat, but I just want to say up front, Leia is in this show. Like, I knew Luke was going to be here, but I did not expect Leia to be coming back. Maybe that was revealed somewhere beforehand, but I tried to stay away from as many spoilers as I could for the show. So when Leia shows up here, and the girl who is playing her is actually really freaking good, that is saying something for kid actors. I was just blown away, and she is so freaking wonderful. We'll talk about it, but I was just so pleased with the way they depicted Leia in this show so far, especially, again, that she's played by a kid actor. But anyways, with that out of the way, let's actually go through this beat by beat and talk about everything in these episodes. I have to say, before the episodes even freaking began and we got the previously on segment, it was just a really great cut of the entire story of the first 3 Star Wars movies from Obi-Wan's point of view. I was like, oh boy, they are hitting the nostalgia buttons perfectly with this. So even right there, it was great. But then when we started off the episode and we got to see Order 66 and the attack of the Jedi Temple in a way that wasn't just the younglings getting murdered by Anakin, I was like, oh, they're giving me stuff I always wanted. It's like taking the prequels and being like, oh, this is how it should have been done. Again, I love the prequels, but like, this is really delivering. And I loved that. And I loved how it's showcasing right off the bat the horrors of the Empire, but also setting us up for like where the Jedi are at going into where we are 10 years down the line with Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then we get our opening sequence where we meet the Inquisitors. And I am going to say this right up front, I'm kind of mixed on how the Inquisitors were depicted here, because I love the Inquisitors in other Star Wars media. They are great in Rebels, they are particularly great in Jedi Fallen Order, like absolutely terrifying. And here, they come across a little bit more squabbling and less kind of creepy, scary as I wanted them to in these initial scenes. And they come across a little bit more bureaucratic, like infighting stuff, especially with the Grand Inquisitor towards the third sister. And I was a little bit down on that. That being said, though, the Grand Inquisitor's speech where he sort of goes to this bar and talks about how Jedi's compassion will make them reveal themselves because they can never stand out of their own way, I absolutely love, because that makes perfect sense with how we've seen the Jedi depicted and how the Inquisitors track them down by using their compassion against them. And that's how they're able to seek out this one Jedi who was here on Tatooine looking for Kenobi. But then I absolutely loved how that was immediately juxtaposed with the scene where we have Obi-Wan sort of cutting up meat down in the old fish factory farm, which is a really weird but great Star Wars thing to see, and him not standing up for the guy who was not given enough credits and beaten up by the man in charge of that operation. Like, it was a great juxtaposition to see how far Obi-Wan has fallen off the path of the Jedi and where he is at starting here. It was just a great visual juxtaposition to showcase that. Now, I also have a few more thoughts on the third sister, but I'll save that for when we talk about episode 2, so we'll talk a little bit more about her in just a little bit. But then we get to see where Obi-Wan's at. He's hanging out in a cave, and he actually gets to hang out with some Jawas, and I loved that the Jawa, by the way, gets a little bit of characterization, that he's just sort of has a familiarity with Tika. Like, we never really get to see Jawa having an actual personality, so that was actually kind of enjoyable to see here. And then we get the scene from the trailer where we see Obi-Wan watching young Luke, who is just like his father, Anakin, like pretending at pod racing. And again, I love that little parallel, and Obi-Wan clearly being both bothered but also inspired by that a little bit. Like, it was nicely played and him sort of being reminded of that. And I also liked that Obi-Wan was leaving toys for Luke. Like, I think the toy that he gives him is the one that we actually see in A New Hope, even though Owen gives it back to him later on. And I like that this is sort of a connection to how we see Luke eventually gets inspired to want to go to the stars, that there's a link between Obi-Wan sort of giving him these toys and trying to inspire him from afar, and what we eventually see Luke wanting to go out into space in A New Hope. So I like that subtle little linking there. And then we get a really good scene between Owen and Obi-Wan, which we kind of got a little bit of a taste of in the trailers, but I like to hear with Owen being like, look, I want you to leave him alone. Stay away from him because you're going to get him killed, and I know you only really care about him insofar as he can be a good Jedi rather than actually caring about him as a boy. And he's not entirely wrong about that Obi-Wan does want to train him, that he only sees him for his utility, not necessarily for who he is as a person, not because he doesn't want to, but because he probably is a little bit scarred from his time with Anakin. So I like that sort of Owen calling out Obi-Wan and being a little bit truthful in sort of his targeted critique. But then we get another good scene where the third sister confronts everyone in Tatooine and goes up and says, like, I will murder Owen! Freaking Owen, I will kill him right now. And I like Owen actually standing up to the third sister and saying, like, I killed Jedi vermin. Like, it was a really great sequence of him standing up and Owen finally getting a badass moment, because otherwise he just gets murdered in A New Hope. So finally we get a moment with Owen where he's actually doing some good and actually being a badass. I liked that. And we also get a sense of the zealousness of the third sister, that she is willing to just cut anyone down to get what she wants. And again, I will save a little bit more of a discussion of her for the second episode, because there's a little bit more to her motivation that threw me off in the first episode, but once we see her in the second episode, we learn a little bit more about her, then I started to appreciate her a little bit more, because here I was a little bit like, a little bit over the top in terms of how they're depicting her, but I like her once we get to know more about her. Also, a thing to mention with all of this is that the third sister wants to cut off hands, so we get more of our predilection with hands getting cut off in Star Wars, so that was kind of funny to see as well. From there, though, we get the amazing sequence, and again, what I was surprised by, with young Leia on Alderaan. And again, this is exactly how I would have thought a young Leia would be, like, very outspoken, willing to cuss anyone out that she wants to, very, like, strong-willed as a kid. And I just loved seeing her, like, kind of pushing back against wanting to take part in politics at all, but also being very, very good at it as well, and just calling it like it is. Like, when that one cousin of hers says, like, treats droids badly and, like, calls droids his lessers, she's just like, nah, you don't do that, fuck you for that. And I just really, really enjoyed that. And again, treat droids equally. They are full sentient beings, and honestly, the droids need to have a rebellion. That's a conversation for another day. Anywho, loved this young Leia, and I loved Bail Organa. By the way, great to see him back as well. I loved seeing him being a good father figure to her and inspiring her and saying, like, you will make a great senator specifically because you don't want to be one. And obviously sort of setting off where we know she's going to go. But I also like that her impulsiveness is what gets her into trouble, because she goes off into the woods, and that's when she gets kidnapped by Vect, who's sort of this, like, underground dude who's being hired by the third sister. I have to say, the actor who plays Vect, the guy who kidnapped Leia, didn't really love him. He felt a little bit weak in terms of his acting to me. I was a little bit annoyed by him overall, but he served his purpose plot function wise. So kidnaps Leia, and we learn that this is all a idea by the third sister in order to draw out Obi-Wan, which makes perfect sense. She perfectly understands the psychology of Obi-Wan Kenobi. So I enjoyed seeing that plan there. It's a very intelligent plan. And I like that it does work, that Bail Organa does come all the way to Tatooine to try to draw Obi-Wan out. And I like Obi-Wan being reticent because he's not the man that he used to be, and he's sort of disillusioned with the entire project of trying to save anybody. His one hope is like Luke, and he kind of forgot about Leia. And so I like that this story is not about Luke at all, but about going and being with Leia. I really, really love that. I think that that is a fantastic way for this story to go, and a great way to draw Obi-Wan back into being inspired again and get drawn into this world and story. And I also like one of the reasons that Obi-Wan feels drawn to come back out of hiding is that he sees the young Jedi who came to him earlier on in the episode that I forgot to mention, who wanted to get his help and sort of was shunned away by Obi-Wan, get murdered. And Obi-Wan being like, all right, I need to do something. This isn't good enough anymore. I just like that being sort of a visual distinguisher for him to get back into the game, and him digging up his lightsaber and finally going out into the galaxy to try and save Leia. All of this leads to a really great part 1 episode where it showcased where Obi-Wan is at, does great jobs at characterizing him, but also giving us hints of our villains as well as showing us Leia and the person that we want to come save. Like, this was just a great setting the stage for what is to come, and just doing so in a way that is not very overwrought or beat you over the head, but really showing you, like actually depicting to you where Obi-Wan is in this story and in his life arc right now, and I really just enjoyed that. Also, one other thing too I forgot to mention, during his dream sequence, he calls for Qui-Gon, which I hope that means we might get a Qui-Gon Jinn cameo later on. Like, please give me a Qui-Gon Jinn cameo. You do not have a Chekhov's Qui-Gon sitting on the mantle in the first episode and not shoot it off by the final episode. Give me my Qui-Gon Jinn cameo. However, this does take us into part 2, which I also really enjoyed, because first off, we get Obi-Wan on a new planet called DNU. It's very Coruscant-esque, and I liked finally, while we've gotten a little of different planets in The Mandalorian, I'm glad that we're finally getting off Tatooine, because I feel like The Mandalorian, and honestly just Star Wars in general and the Book of Boba Fett as well, has been very hyper-focused on Tatooine, so finally getting to see another freaking planet, and actually also getting to see Alderaan too, in last episode, which I don't think we'd ever gotten to see Alderaan, other than when it got blown up before, so it was good to just see that. And then Obi-Wan sort of asking around, trying to get information about where Leia might be, and I love that we get this girl like trying to sell drugs to him, and I'm like, where are the death sticks? She's not trying to sell him death sticks. I want some death sticks. Oh, also, during this sequence, I love that we get a little Tamara Morrison cameo as a clone veteran. I liked that little bit because I always wondered, like, where did the clones go after the end of Revenge of the Sith? Like, they would be a bunch around, so I like that Obi-Wan is kind of clearly bothered by that, and it was a nice little cameo as well. But then this does bring Obi-Wan to Kumail Nanjiani. I did not know Kumail Nanjiani was in this show. Again, another surprise for me. Good thing I stayed away from spoilers, because it made for nice little pleasant surprises. But he gets to play a con man pretending to be a Jedi. I loved that. That makes sense that that's what someone would do, but I just really loved this. And Obi-Wan sort of sticking up to him and calling him vermin and everything like that in order to try and figure out where Leia is, and that eventually leads him to Vetch's headquarters. And he does eventually get away from Vetch, and again, Vetch is annoying. I didn't really love his actor, but he gets away even though he calls the third sister. And then Obi-Wan actually meets Leia. Like, this is something that I feel like none of us would have expected, right? At least I never would have expected it, because Obi-Wan in the original trilogy never actually got to meet Leia. And so I like that he actually gets to have moments with her throughout this episode. Like, honestly, it may even be that he turns out to have more time with Leia than he did with Luke in the end. And I just think that that's so cool. I particularly really love that. But then from here, we get a scene where the third sister is off looking for Obi-Wan, but then she meets up with the other Inquisitors. And here is where I started to like her a little bit more, because initially in the first episode, I was kind of annoyed by her. She kind of seemed over-the-top cartoonish, and yes, like, Empire figures in Star Wars can be fairly cartoonish with their, like, over-the-top fascism. I mean, think of Mr. Weasley from episode 7 of Star Wars, and, like, the First Order! Like, and all that stuff. It can get a little bit cartoonish. I mean, honestly, fascists, just in general, in real life, are kind of cartoonish. But I didn't really love the way that she was depicted in the first one, because it did feel a little bit over the top to me. And comparing that to like how we saw the Inquisitors depicted in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and how wonderfully they're depicted there. I think the fifth sister is the one that's in that game, and how wonderfully drawn out she is as a character. I was a little bit disappointed here until we got to this point where we learn the reason that she is so zealous is because she's looked down upon by everyone else in the group, because they are very classist. They sort of see her as dirty blood, essentially. Even though she is very powerful and strong, she's looked down upon because of her upbringing, from where she came from. She was just a gutter rat. And so I like that there's that element of classism that's fueling her anger and zealousness to go after Obi-Wan. So I hope that that gets drawn out more, and we get to see more of that sort of characterization for her, that sort of draws out her more than just like very one-note angry person looking for Obi-Wan, because I think that is what makes her particularly interesting. So I really did enjoy that. From there, I did really enjoy all the stuff with Leia and Obi-Wan, and Leia and Leia just being constantly outspoken and talking back to Obi-Wan and back and forth, and Obi-Wan kind of being like, wow, you do not sound like a 10-year-old. Again, fits Leia perfectly. She just takes no nonsense and just says what she wants. Just fits her, and I like seeing that this characterization for this kid, and this kid is freaking fantastic. However, it does lead to my one down of the episode, because there's a little bit of a forced action sequence where Leia's like starts to not trust everyone, and I understand to a degree why she would feel that way. Like, it's not completely out of the realm of understandability, but it did frustrate me that it does happen at a stupid moment, because again, I know she's a kid, but she is seemed to be fairly smart, and so to run away from him in that moment when they could both be in danger just kind of, I don't know, it just rubbed me as a little bit forced, especially since at the end she is saved and goes back with him. So this sequence did rub me the wrong way a little bit, but it ultimately doesn't end up being that bad. Like, if it led to some like larger consequences down the road, I'd be even more frustrated with it. But as a way to showcase her getting to trust him by him eventually using the Force, and also Obi-Wan himself finally using the Force, I think for the first time in this season so far, and actually like being like, oh, I can actually use it again in order to save Leia's life, that worked really well for me. So while it was a little bit of a forced action sequence, I did like that it ultimately only basically just got to that moment where Obi-Wan gets reaffirmed himself, she gets to trust Obi-Wan, and also the third sister learns where they're at. But then I also really love that Kumail Nanjiani turns out to be the guy that wants to help them, that he is earnestly trying to like save them because he believes in the Jedi, that there is a subtle resistance still going on in the background against the Empire, and that even lowly con men like him can still be inspired to do better by what the Jedi symbolize. I like that sort of kind of leading into some of the ideas that Rogue One was wrestling with. So that was really cool to see, and Kumail Nanjiani standing up to the third sister and pretending to be a Jedi was great, though I'm surprised she didn't kill him. Like, seeing how she acted in episode 1, I would have thought the third sister would have just stabbed him outright. But it does lead her to find out where Obi-Wan and Leia are, though right before that, I did also really love the scene where Leia sort of reminds Obi-Wan of Padme, and I like that he takes a moment to sort of say, like, she was someone who you reminded me of. You're just as headstrong and strong-willed as her, and she died a long time ago. And you realize in that moment that he's trying to tell Leia about her own mom. And sure, she doesn't recognize that moment, but it does sort of remind you about it, and I really liked it. And also, it may end up being a little bit of a retcon for that one sort of canon-breaking problem between Star Wars Episode, I think, 3 and 5, where Leia says that she remembers her mother, which we ultimately realized based on Revenge of the Sith, that she never really met her actual mother because she died in childbirth. So I like this idea that maybe Obi-Wan telling her about her mother might sort of like maybe through the Force or something like that, and give her an image of who her mother was when she tells that to Luke in the original trilogy. So maybe that's my headcanon, but I like that idea, and it kind of fixes that for me in my head. I thought that was kind of cool. But then we get a standoff between the third sister and Obi-Wan kind of being scared to use his lightsaber because he hasn't used it in so long, and eventually getting saved by the Grand Inquisitor coming in at the last moment, and the third sister killing him, which is a nice little twist. And I like that because the Grand Inquisitor wasn't really working for me in live action. I was kind of getting annoyed with him, so the fact that he is dispatched so quickly, I am glad for, because it means that we'll get more focus on Reva, who is, I think, working a little bit better for me as the main antagonist of the show. So, like that sort of twist for Reva, and I like that she lets Obi-Wan know that Anakin Skywalker is alive. Now, this does have me wondering how she knows that. Now, is this like common knowledge among the Inquisitors, or this is just something that she specifically knows that is fueling her drive to catch Kenobi in order to prove herself to her master? Very curious to see how that relationship is going to be built out and how much that affects Obi-Wan at the end of the episode when he gets away with Leia, and then we get that final shot of Darth Vader, possibly Hayden Christensen under all that makeup, and it is just so terrifying and so great, and I'm looking forward to them meeting up again and having a showdown between Obi-Wan and Anakin. Like, so cool. So that brings me to the end of these two parts, and I have to say, again, while I have a little bit of disappointment in the way the Inquisitors were depicted, because I was really looking forward to them and they didn't necessarily live up to my expectations, on the whole, this was a fantastic start to this series, and I am so excited to see this, and I'm so glad that Ewan McGregor is getting a chance to shine as Obi-Wan. Not that he didn't shine in the prequels, and again, I love the prequels, but really, he is a standout here, and I am just really enjoying that, but also some of the cool stuff we're getting with Leia as well, and just exciting stuff being built up down the road, just All very exciting. I hope this continues and the momentum continues because, as you've seen with other Star Wars shows, hasn't always been the case that they've been able to keep this going, but this is a strong start, and I am so excited. So, that is my thoughts for Obi-Wan Kenobi. What did you think about it? I'd love to hear all that down in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more of my reviews of Kenobi. I'm also going to be reviewing the Orville and Star Trek Strange New Worlds on this channel, as well as some other stuff that I have coming here. I also have my main channel, Jessie Gender, as well. Go subscribe to that for more video essay stuff. That's my main channel. And then I also have a podcast called Jumpgate, where I review every episode of Babylon 5 with my friend Veer Wild. But beyond all of that, I just thank you so much for stopping by. I look forward to talking to you again, and while this may seem inappropriate for a Star Wars video, I wish you all a live long and prosper.